Imagine discovering the two people you trusted most, your partner and your best friend, were hiding something unthinkable behind your back. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt, it rewrites your entire reality. Now, picture this, their wedding day, a celebration of their so-called love. But unknown to them, it's also the day everything they've kept buried comes crashing to the surface. This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's about transformation, pain turned into purpose, silence into strategy. A masterclass in how to take the high road with a little detour through poetic justice. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud or violent. Sometimes, it's served cold, on a day they'll never forget. They say some betrayals don't come from enemies, but from the people you'd never expect. The story begins with someone just like any of us. Let's call them Alex, grounded, genuine, and deeply invested in the life they were building. Alex had been in a steady, long-term relationship with someone who, at the time, felt like home. The kind of relationship marked not by chaos or drama, but comfort, familiar routines, shared morning coffees, weekend getaways, late-night talks about the future, where to live, how many kids, even the color of the wedding theme. But what made Alex's world even more complete was the presence of Jamie, their childhood best friend. The kind of friend who was more like family. They'd grown up together, survived teenage heartbreaks together, supported each other through college, and celebrated every milestone side by side. Jamie was the kind of person who could walk into Alex's apartment without knocking, help themselves to snacks, and curl up on the couch as if they lived there. And no one ever questioned it. That's just how tight they were. The three of them, Alex, their partner, and Jamie, formed a trio that seemed unbreakable. Dinners, movie nights, birthdays, they shared it all. Friends envied their dynamic. People often commented on how lucky Alex was to have love and loyalty from two such significant people. And Alex believed that, wholeheartedly. But sometimes, even the clearest skies hide gathering storms. The first cracks in the surface came quietly, almost unnoticeably. There were times Alex's partner would come home later than usual, brushing it off as traffic or an unexpected meeting. Jamie, too, started becoming oddly unavailable. Plans were rescheduled more often. Texts left on read. Alex chalked it up to adulthood, life pulling everyone in different directions. After all, relationships, even friendships, had ebbs and flows. Then came the shift in body language. The partner, once effortlessly affectionate, seemed slightly distant. Kisses grew shorter, eye contact more fleeting. And Jamie, who sometimes, the truth doesn't come in whispers. It crashes through the door, loud and undeniable. For Alex, the moment of truth began like any other ordinary evening. The sun was beginning to dip below the skyline, painting golden hues across the living room walls. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Their partner hadn't answered the last two texts. Jamie hadn't been seen in days. There was no reason to panic. Not yet. But something fell off. Out of sheer instinct. Or maybe the lingering unease that had quietly gnawed at Alex for weeks, they logged into a shared cloud account. It was something they'd set up long ago for convenience. Photos from vacations, grocery lists, even dinner recipes. They hadn't touched it in months. But tonight, something pulled them toward it. What they found shattered everything. There they were, photos that were never meant to be seen. Intimate, smiling, together. Their partner and Jamie, wrapped in each other's arms, in places that Alex instantly recognized. That cozy cabin in the woods, the one Alex had planned to visit with their partner over the holidays, they had gone without Alex. Together. Text messages followed, screenshots synced from a backup, conversations filled with inside jokes, late-night check-ins, and admissions of love that belonged to stolen moments. The betrayal was more than physical. It was emotional, deep, intentional. The floor felt like it dropped beneath Alex's feet. The kind of heartbreak that hits when you realize it wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a choice. Repeated, hidden, nurtured behind your back by the very people you trusted most. Alex couldn't breathe. There were no tears at first. Just a cold, sinking feeling that settled in their chests like cement. Betrayal didn't scream. It whispered. It echoed. And in that silence, everything they thought they knew unraveled. Fueled by a flood of disbelief and rage, Alex drove, unthinking, to Jamie's place. The door opened slower than usual, and the look on Jamie's face confirmed everything. There was no elaborate denial, no stammering explanation, just silence. Heavy, ashamed. Alex didn't scream. They didn't cry. The confrontation unfolded like a quiet implosion. Words were exchanged, cutting, raw, unfiltered. Jamie tried to speak, to justify, to apologize. The partner arrived midway, confusion melting into panic as they saw Alex standing there, holding proof in their hand like a loaded weapon. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a collapse of worlds. Alex walked away that night with nothing but truth, and the bitter realization that trust, once broken by both love and friendship, leaves a scar unlike any other. There were no goodbyes, just the sound of a door closing behind them. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the story wasn't over. Not even close. Overshared everything from their favorite memes to the awkward date they had last week, became more guarded. Conversations felt filtered, cautious, like something unspoken was always just beneath the surface. Still, Alex pushed the thoughts aside. Trust was something they valued deeply, something they didn't hand out lightly, but once given, believed in completely. Looking back, there were signs. Like the time Alex came home early from work and found Jamie there, alone with their partner. The explanation was simple enough. Jamie had stopped by to borrow a book, but the tension in the room hung thick, unspoken, and quickly brushed off. Or how Alex would occasionally find things out of place. A familiar hoodie in the wrong laundry pile, a wine glass used when no one else was supposed to be over. Doubt flickered, but never caught fire. Because to believe something so unthinkable, to suspect both a partner and a best friend, felt like betrayal in itself. Alex blamed stress, overthinking, maybe even insecurity. They couldn't have known that the real betrayal had already taken root. It was only later, much later, that the full picture would come into focus. And when it did, it would hit like a freight train. But at this stage in the story, Alex was still clinging to hope, still showing up, still trusting, unaware that the people they loved most had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Heartbreak has a way of hollowing a person out, but sometimes, in that void, something else takes root. In the weeks that followed the betrayal, Alex withdrew. The apartment was emptied of shared memories, frames taken down, drawers cleared, laughter erased. They moved like a shadow, existing but not quite living. Friends reached out. Some offered sympathy, others tried to piece together what happened. But Alex didn't say much. What could they say that would make sense of being shattered by the two people they trusted most? The pain sat with them like a ghost. But in the stillness, clarity began to form. It started not as vengeance, but as a question. Why? Why had they been so blind? Why had the people they loved treated them like an afterthought? And the more they dug into the timeline, the more the pieces of betrayal aligned too perfectly to be excused as a mistake. This wasn't something that just happened. It was plotted, hidden, maintained. That realization burned hotter than heartbreak. One evening, while scrolling mindlessly through social media, Alex stumbled across a post, photos from an engagement. Their engagement. Their ex and Jamie, smiling, arms raised, rings glinting in the sun. The caption? Forever started with friendship. The bile rose in Alex's throat. That night, sleep didn't come. Instead, Alex sat in silence, replaying everything, from the weekend getaways that suddenly got canceled to the late-night work excuses. Every red flag now screamed. But instead of breaking again, Alex began to build. The idea didn't arrive fully formed. It trickled in, slow and deliberate. What if their wedding wasn't the start of forever, but the moment they'd remember for all the wrong reasons? Still, Alex wrestled with the thought. They were not a cruel person. Revenge felt low. But justice? Justice for being made a fool, discarded, replaced like something used up. That didn't feel cruel. That felt necessary. So the planning began. Not impulsive, not emotional, strategic. Alex knew both of them well, their routines, their weaknesses, their secrets. Every detail from the years of friendship and love became potential leverage. The venue they had chosen, Alex had helped scout it, even before the betrayal came to light. The guest list, filled with mutual acquaintances and family members who still hadn't heard the truth. They all thought Alex had moved on peacefully. Perfect. Alex created a new email. Anonymous. Clean. With it came the slow dissemination of information, screenshots of messages, timeline breakdowns, overlapping photos with dates circled in red, all packaged and sent to a curated list of people who deserved to know the kind of people they were about to celebrate. But it wasn't just emails. Alex made sure that truths were timed, leaked in waves. Strategic drops. Enough to raise questions. Enough to cause whispers. Every move was calculated, not to destroy lives, just to illuminate the truth. And as each step unfolded, Alex felt the shift, not from victim to villain, but from silence to control. They weren't trying to ruin a wedding. They were trying to reclaim the dignity that had been stolen in whispers and deceit. Still doubt crept in at night. Was this too much? Was revenge really worth it? But every time they saw another curated photo of fake smiles and stolen happiness paraded online as meant to be, the fire returned. This wasn't petty. This was justice, dressed in wedding attire. And the stage was almost set. The day had arrived. The skies were clear. The venue, a rustic countryside estate dressed in soft florals and gold accents, buzzed with excitement. Guests arrived, unaware of a storm brewing beneath the surface, polished shoes stepping into a moment they'd never forget. Alex was not on the guest list. Not officially. But they were there. They wore no disguise. There was no need. Few people in attendance knew the full story, and those who did had been sworn to silence by the newlyweds. But some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, claw their way to the surface, especially when given a little help. Earlier that morning, a delivery had been made to the venue's event coordinator. A sleek black envelope marked to be read before vows. Inside, a letter, short, sharp, and signed anonymously. Tucked behind it, a flash drive. The coordinator, thinking it was part of the ceremony, passed it to the best man, who passed it to the groom. The groom read the letter, and his face changed. Alex watched from afar, seated at the edge of the ceremony garden, half hidden behind an archway. Not yet involved, just observing. Timing was everything. The ceremony began. Music swelled. The crowd stood as the bride entered, but tension already rippled through the air. The groom was fidgeting, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then came the vows. Hers, shaky but sweet. His shorter, off-script, uncomfortable. And then came the speech. It wasn't supposed to happen. But there she was, Maria, one of Alex's mutual friends, rising from her chair, a folded piece of paper in her hand. She hadn't told Alex she'd speak. They'd only shared the files with her a few nights ago. But Maria was loyal, and she had a voice that carried. "Before we celebrate this union," she said, eyes fixed on the bride and groom, "I think it's only fair that we talk about how we got here. Because not everyone in this story got a happy ending." Gasps spread through the garden like wildfire. The bride's hand reached for her groom's. The groom froze. Maria continued, calm, composed, devastating. She spoke of dates that overlapped. Of weekends Alex was left alone, thinking their partner was working overtime. She quoted texts, word for word, between the bride and groom, dated long before their respective breakups. She painted a picture of manipulation, a betrayal not just romantic but personal. Then, as if to punctuate the truth, the projector screen, meant for wedding photos, flickered to life. There, for all to see, were side-by-side images. One of Alex and their ex on a getaway, time-stamped. The next, from the same weekend, of the ex and the bride at a bar. Photos, text threads, even a brief voice message. Whispers turned to stunned silence. Some guests stood up, some sat in disbelief. One elderly aunt clutched her pearls in theatrical horror. The bride, red-faced, bolted from the altar. The groom chased after her. Chair scraped. Murmurs filled the air. Chaos. Alex didn't move, just watched. But revenge, even the most carefully crafted, never comes without complication. One of the groomsmen, Jamie's brother, stormed toward Maria, accusing her of sabotage. The venue coordinator, realizing what had been shown, threatened to cut the power. But it was too late. The truth was out. Security was called. People shouted. Families fought. Guests began to leave, some in awkward silence, others in angry huffs. And Alex, They walked away. No fireworks. No dramatic final line. Just quiet satisfaction. Later, they'd learned the wedding never legally concluded. The officiant refused to sign. The family demanded refunds. Friendships dissolved. Reputations were scorched. But most importantly, the lie, the perfect couple, the innocent romance, was dismantled before it could ever begin. Not out of spite, but to remind them all, truth has a way of showing up, especially when someone's brave enough to hold up the mirror. The ceremony that never was had left a crater in its place. Guests trickled out of the venue, their elegant clothes rumpled by tension, their expressions a mix of disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. Phones lit up, messages flew. No one wanted to be the last to know or the last to speak on it. Within hours, whispers turned into status updates, group chat screenshots, and blurry clips circulating social media. The wedding, which once promised to be a picture-perfect event, had become a public lesson in betrayal. Inside the bridal suite, the once blushing bride sat on the floor, veil discarded, mascara running. Her bridesmaids stood stiffly nearby, unsure whether to comfort her or keep their distance. Some had suspected. None had expected this. The groom, who just hours ago envisioned a night of celebration, was now surrounded by his family, his mother furious, his father silent, and his younger brother refusing to look him in the eye. "What were you thinking?" one relative asked. There were no answers, only silence and shame. Meanwhile, Alex was nowhere to be found. The decision to leave before the dust fully settled was intentional. This wasn't about watching it burn. It was about making sure the fire had been lit and then stepping away. But the fallout reached far beyond that single afternoon. Within days, the bride's family announced they were pulling back financial support for the couple's honeymoon and future plans. Her job, at a conservative firm with a strict personal conduct policy, placed her on indefinite leave. Rumors had spread, and in her line of work, public perception mattered. The groom fared no better. Several of his groomsmen distanced themselves. A few mutual friends of his and Alex openly cut ties. Invitations were rescinded, plans canceled. He became the main character in a cautionary tale nobody wanted to be part of. Families once close were now divided. Parents who once shared dinner tables now exchanged curt messages, or none at all. And the couple, they tried to hold on. Maybe out of pride, maybe out of desperation. But resentment builds quickly when it begins in the shadow of exposure. Fights became routine. Trust, already brittle, crumbled. Within weeks, they separated. No legal marriage to untangle. No assets to split. Just two people, left to sit with what they'd done, and what it had cost them. Alex never gloated, never posted, never replied to the countless messages asking for the real story. Their silence spoke loud enough. And as for the guests, the venue, the photos that would never be framed, they all became part of a whispered memory. A wedding remembered not for vows or dances, but for a truth revealed too late. In the weeks that followed, Alex sat with the silence. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that fills a room heavy with everything that had been said, everything that had been done. The revenge had landed with precision. Every detail had played out just as planned. But this wasn't the kind of victory you celebrate. There were no fireworks, no champagne. Just a quiet acknowledgement justice had been served. Still, closure is rarely clean. Some nights brought relief, a deep, satisfying exhale. Alex would think back to that day, to the look on their faces, and feel the tight knot of betrayal loosen just a bit. Other nights, though, were harder. Not because of regret, but because even when you win, some losses stay with you. A best friend who was once like family, now a stranger. A partner whose promises turned to dust. Years of trust, gone in a single discovery. But through the ache, something unexpected began to bloom. Resilience. Alex didn't just survive the fallout. They rose from it. Wiser, more guarded, but stronger than before. The experience, brutal as it was, unearthed truths they'd ignored for too long. The subtle dismissals, the casual lies, the feeling of always giving more than receiving. They saw it all now, clearly. And with that clarity came a shift. Alex began reconnecting with old passions, rebuilding friendships that had faded during the relationship. They poured energy into their work, into self-care, into rediscovering the person they'd been before betrayal had clouded the mirror. There was no need for revenge part 2. The story was over. The lesson had been written in bold. Never ignore your gut. Loyalty without reciprocity is self-sacrifice. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, not with bitterness, but with your head held high. By the end of it all, Alex didn't just get revenge. They got something far more valuable. They got themselves back. Just when you thought betrayal was limited to love and friendship, let me introduce you to Marcus, an overlooked analyst in a high-stakes corporate world, a man whose loyalty was weaponized against him in the coldest way. Marcus had given 5 years of tireless commitment to his company. Early mornings, late nights, weekend calls. He was the go-to guy, the problem solver, the one who always stayed late to fix someone else's mess. His boss, Alan, praised him constantly, called him the glue that held the department together. But glue doesn't get promotions. One day, out of the blue, Marcus found out he'd been passed over again. Not for lack of performance, not for lack of effort, but because Alan had a better fit in mind. That better fit? His college buddy, Travis. A man with barely 2 years of experience, a flashy smile, and a LinkedIn profile full of buzzwords and hot air. Travis wasn't just underqualified, he was out of his depth from the start. At first, Marcus did what most of us do, swallow the disappointment, fake a smile, and keep grinding. But as Travis stumbled through even the most basic tasks Marcus had mastered years ago, something inside him shifted. He didn't want destruction. He wanted truth. So Marcus got strategic. He stopped buffering Travis's incompetence. When Travis submitted incomplete reports, Marcus didn't fix them in silence. When deadlines were missed, he didn't cover with late-night miracles. And when a major project, overseen by Travis, began to unravel, Marcus sat back and let the reality speak for itself. Then came the client meeting. Travis, unprepared and unaware, walked into that room holding a presentation that Marcus had intentionally left flawed, full of subtle but critical gaps. Not sabotage, just a lack of support. The fallout was immediate. The client pulled out. The board launched an inquiry. Alan was questioned. Why had someone so clearly unqualified been put in charge of a flagship account? Emails were reviewed, Slack logs exposed, and soon enough, the connection between Alan and Travis came to light. Personal favoritism, breach of ethical conduct. Within a month, both men were out, fired without ceremony. Marcus, he didn't celebrate loudly. He didn't need to. The truth had done the talking. His quiet refusal to carry the weight of their incompetence became his act of rebellion. Justice, in its simplest form, letting the chips fall exactly where they deserved. This story might not have wedding speeches or dramatic exits, but it has something just as satisfying: the quiet power of knowing your worth and making sure others do too. Because betrayal isn't always loud, and neither is revenge. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud or cruel. It just needs the right moment to rise. Whether it's at a wedding altar or in a corporate boardroom, truth has a way of shining through, even in the shadows. Have you ever witnessed karma serve a cold dish of consequences? Maybe you've lived through it yourself. Drop your story in the comments, I'm all ears. And if these tales of quiet revenge and poetic justice keep you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's always another story waiting to be told. Until next time, stay sharp. This is Revenge Chronicles.